Hello, my painting students. Today, I would like to roll out a new project for you. It is called the stained glass oil crayons painting. So yes, you can paint with these oil crayons and it'll look a lot like a painting. And we're going to do it in the style of stained glass. So I guess it probably is a good idea to start talking about what is stained glass. So I've got a quick presentation for you. I'm going to try to get you jazzed about stained glass, and then I will transition into how you're going to do this project, the few parameters I'm looking for. We'll look at some student examples and you'll know just what to do. Here we go. All right. So as you can see on step one, page one here, these are some examples. So take a look at these a bit more closely and you can wrap your head around what we are about to do. I'm sure at some point you've seen some stained glass, whether you're religious or not. I'm sure you've stepped into some kind of a church or some place that has some stained glass. So all the different colors are separated by different lines, little black lines. And so they look kind of like broken up into pieces. That's the main look we're going for. But let's learn a bit more about stained glass. It's basically an art form where you have colored pieces of glass, tiny individual pieces that are all placed in like what they call a mosaic. A mosaic is when you put a bunch of pieces together to make one whole. You can do it with tile, yeah, ceramic. You can do it with a drawing, or you can do a photo mosaic or photo, um, yeah, mosaic, or you could do it with glass. So the glass is held together with these thin strips they call leading, sometimes thicker strips if you're going to go really tall. But that's what gives it stability and holds it together so the glass doesn't fall apart. Just taking a look at a few really impressive pieces. Here's one in Mexico. Imagine the light from the sun coming through that, putting beams of color on the floor. Another super famous one, which I've got to see in person a few times, is at Notre Dame Cathedral in France. This is the large rose window that's right at the center facade. That's the front of Notre Dame Cathedral. And there's other stained glass throughout the building, but this one, really impressive. In fact, during World War II, they took this window or all these panes out. The town was being bombed and they didn't want everything to break. So they preserved these by taking all the windows out of Notre Dame Cathedral, putting them deep underground. And once the war was over and the war was won, they replaced them and put them back. And I don't know how they fared after the fire they had a couple years ago, but glass holds up pretty good in a fire unless it's really hot. I'm curious to know what state these windows are currently. As you may have heard, Notre Dame caught on fire just about almost 2 years ago now. Anyway, pretty impressive when you look at the fine detail of these. Serious artistry. Here's another one that's just kind of cool. Here's a globe that you can walk inside of. We always think of a globe as something that's spherical, like a basketball you could hold in your hand. Well, in this case, you can go inside of it, and so it's kind of the script. It's like you are inside the sphere, looking out. It's kind of cool, and that's in the library in Massachusetts. Another pretty impressive one is the skylight in Barcelona, Spain. I mean, this thing is actually 3D, so it's not just flat. But like the last one we just saw, yes, you can curve stained glass. I mean, look at the ornamentation of this. Oh my gosh. So that's a closer look at that one. So just pretty impressive, you have to admit. We are not going to do this. We are not going to cut glass and make things this impressive. But I just want you to wrap your head around, what can be done. So just quickly about glass, kind of impressive that the Egyptians were the first to make glass, and the Romans got their hands on it, probably by accident. If you take sand, essentially, and you heat it up, let's say you were making something in a kiln or a really hot oven, and some sand got in there. By the time it cooled, you might go like this and pick it up and go, "What is this clear, crispy thing here? That's really hard." And then you could learn how to mess with it, how to blow glass, how to you know, if you've ever seen a glass blower working, they can do some pretty impressive stuff. So, like most of our inventions, like ceramic, probably, invented by accident. I always envision someone who's, like some tribe that made something out of clay and they made a bowl, and then the village caught fire. And everything got burnt up except the clay bowl. Now it's hard as a rock. Well, a little light bulb lightly. I'm tongue tied. A little light bulb likely went off, and they said, "Hey, we can make ceramic. Hey, we can make glass." So here's some really early, glass making. both in Egypt, where they started to use colors as well, and in Rome. So at first, when people made stained glass, to be honest, they didn't even use glass. The earliest was sliced alabaster, which is a kind of a rock. So, and you could actually, I mean, you can slice it really thin, and you could have light shining through. So they started using it in churches early in the fourth and fifth century. And here's one of the earliest ones from England in the seventh century. But that's the earliest stained glass. You know, people taking bits of glass and putting it together. Here's some stained glass from the Middle East, where they did not use imagery like, you know, Jesus and Mary. Well, obviously they weren't, you know, Jesus believers, and this is not a religious lesson, but you know, they were really into patterning, not having people's faces depicted, but just to have different tessellating shapes and things, you know, repeating shapes. That's what the, especially the Moors, who were, you know, of Islamic faith that lived in, say, southern Spain. Anyway, the height, the biggest, you know, most impressive part of stained glass was in the 12th and 13th centuries, where all the churches and cathedrals were really using this to their advantage. Not only did it make the church look beautiful and allow beautiful light and color to come in, but it basically had narratives or little, you know, vignettes or stories about the Bible, so that people who were illiterate, and most were in the 12th and 13th century, they couldn't read, they could look at the pictures and they could put stories together. They could figure out who the important players were, who were the saints, who were the angels, who was, you know, the key players in biblical history. So it was a great way for, it was kind of a teaching method. And these things are just super impressive. So if you ever get to, you know, Notre Dame or Chartres Cathedral, or there's so many pretty impressive pieces. Now during the Renaissance, so we're talking 13, 14, even the 15th, 1500s, um, people began just painting on the stained glass as well. So it wasn't enough just to have little individual pieces of color all stitched together to make a mosaic. They learned how to paint and then burn that paint into the glass through heat, so that you could really get some amazing effects. So here we are, 19th century, not so long ago, and stained glass is really getting pretty impressive. Then it comes to America, you know, in about 1843, this guy named William J. Bolton created the first stained glass here in America. That's not that long ago, really, you know, just a few generations back. And he was only here in America for a short time, but it really took off. After he leaves, this guy named Tiffany, maybe you've heard of Tiffany, maybe you've got some Tiffany jewelry in the past. Um, well, Tiffany really took off with it. Him, his father, his son, they made a big deal out of it. But Louis Comfort Tiffany was the one that really made it artistic. When you look at his work, you can tell this isn't someone who's just doing this for the first time. Like they're almost like paintings, almost like what you guys are doing. So pretty impressive. These are all examples of Tiffany's work. You might know Tiffany for a Tiffany lamp. Those were also very popular. So not only did he do a lot of commissioned artwork, he started a company and started making lamps and windows and other things, and then eventually into jewelry, which was more his son, who's also Louis Tiffany. They shared the same name. But if you have a Tiffany lamp in your house, well, first of all, it's likely just an imposter, or it's a fake or reproduction. But if you had an original Tiffany, it could be worth thousands, tens of thousands of dollars. They are very rare because they're so delicate and fragile. Can you imagine making a lamp where the light shone through like that and it looks like a tree? And look how organic it is. Pretty cool. So again, here's some more Tiffany examples. Now, let's talk about stained glass today. Where are we today? Well, today we've got these what we call kitsch, or very cheesy forms of stained glass, where people are making little window clings where you can make a stained glass window by just putting a film up that you buy. That's kind of cheesy. There's lots of things like this you might find at Hobby Lobby or craft stores like Michael's or Joann's, where you could make your own and you could even bake it in an oven. There's fusee beads. There's different ways to cheat and kind of make it. But some artists are still doing it, you know, the real way. They're making real stained glass just like they were, you know, centuries ago, but they're taking it to the next level because, of course, you know, technology changes and how impressive the impressive things we can do with stained glass these days. Ugh. Amazing. And there's jobs out there if you're interested. Generally, these are for more high-end clients. You can make stained glass entrance windows to, say, a cellar or a bar or a front entryway to a home. And generally, they're commission pieces, so they're meant to be a site-specific or size-specific piece. And that's you can make a lot of money doing that. So you generally see these, they're reserved for more ritzy high class homes. But you will see them at fairs, craft fairs, art fairs. Generally, they're going to be much smaller because you're not going to want to transport large pieces of stained glass and hope that someone would buy it. So little things like this, but they sell. Some people love these. You put them in a window, the light shines through, and they're pretty impressive. I love this guitar one. That would be kind of cool to have in my home. If you ever see it, say at a garage sale or something, and you can tell it's an old stained glass window, pick it up. They can be worth a lot of money, the older ones especially. Even today, now we have fine artists doing this. This is a current artist, Kahindi Wiley. He's about my age, and he's doing some pretty impressive things with stained glass. So, I mean, you can see obviously this is very modern. If you just look at the garb, the dress they're wearing, pretty impressive. This gentleman is generally an oil painter, but here he's showing off his skills in a whole different medium. Here's another, Pinky McClure, doing some more surreal and fantastic types. I mean, what people are doing these days, just amazing. I mean, making a car out of stained glass, probably not very safe, but the things people do these days, the artists are just pushing the limits. It's just amazing. So quickly, you need to know a little bit more about stained glass because I'm going to talk about these parts as it relates to your paintings or drawings as well. Um, Miss Kuhn, who teaches here at our school, got to do this in college. I did not. It's a very specialized medium, and when you're in art school, you can't do it all. I didn't learn to go, blow glass. I didn't learn to do textiles and fashion design. I concentrated on drawing and painting and ceramics and other art forms. But you do need to be careful. She said that she would often hurt herself cutting the glass. Her fingers are always scraped up. You had to use hot, materials and melt things and solder things. And if you're at all interested in learning more about it, here are some schools that we have here in Michigan, just a short list. So yes, you could go to the College for Creative Studies in Detroit, which is a big, fancy art university or college. And you could learn to do it there. And there's other places. Most of these are more studios where you can just go and learn. But if this is something you're like, that's really cool, I would like to make some money doing that. There are jobs out there. But let's take a look at our project. Enough about stained glass. So now hopefully you can see how we are going to kind of make this stained glass-esque. But we're going to do it using oil pastels. And some say you draw with oil pastels, but more people say that you paint with them. They're very closely related to painting with oils. Instead of picking up the paint with a brush, though, you already have it in a stick form. But we say painting because of the way they blend, the way they layer, the way that you can actually activate them with oil to make them move, and the way they glow and the colors. Oh, they're like oil paints. So, in order to survive this project, you need to know that we're going to revisit color and understanding how to use color to our advantage. Balance, whether it's symmetrical or asymmetrical or even radial. And you need to know some oil pastels techniques. So, we've already learned some of that. But today you've learned, or you will learn, also how to use your oil pastels. So these following works were all done with oil pastels, and they're all done in a stained glass-esque sort of vibe, right? They all have bright colors, but they're all outlined or separated by those different black lines. Some of these are professional, like this one. You might see this one at an art fair, and some artists would charge you a lot. And some of these are also student versions. Notice how each individual section doesn't have to just be blue or yellow or orange. They can be a mix of colors. There could be that kind of ombre effect where it goes from light to dark and the color transitions. Some people like I don't know, how do I put it, gritty, kind of handling where you can see the marks of the artist and it's not perfectly blended smooth, but it's more optically blended where the colors kind of slowly change, but you can see the hand of the artist or the material being applied. So some are a little more raw. I love these abstract ones where you can tell there's people there, but what are these people doing? You have a little bit of a visual treasure hunt for what is going on here. And some are completely abstract. I love these color changes. That's my favorite when I see the color transition from one to another, or even yet a third or fourth color. So hopefully that will inspire some of you to do some of that on the individual sections. Think of them like glass, and the black is what we call the leading. The leading, which is the black lines, in fact, if you were doing this in stained glass, they call it leading because it's well, it used to be lead. Now it's a mixture of 50% lead, 50% tin. It's the metal that looks black, um, that kind of holds all the pieces together, and it's got to be somewhat flexible so you can bend it and you can cut it. So you have to decide right now: do you want to do something abstract, unrecognizable, just go for pretty colors and shapes? That one's pretty impressive. Great visual movement. Boy, those lines have my eyes moving all over the place. Now, something like this would be a little too simple. I really don't want you to write your name and color it in between. I might do that with first, second, third graders. These are just too simple. This one, holy moly, that is complex. If you think you can pull something like this off, wow, great. But I'm not looking for this. This looks like a professional did it. I'm looking for somewhere in between. Anyway, we'll get back to more examples in a second. But first thing you need to understand is color. I'm going to ask you on this project to use one or two, maybe even three, but I would say just really one or two different color schemes so that your work is unified. So refer back to your color schemes worksheet that you've got. Just pick one or two or three that you really like, but try not to pick too many because then it just becomes what I call rainbow sherbet, right? It's just got everything in there. You really want to limit your palette. So just pick one or two. So refer to your color wheel. That can be really helpful. And you can see three or four color schemes right here between complementary colors, analogous, warm, cool. You decide which colors you want to use. So here are some different color schemes artists have used. You can look at these and kind of say, okay, yeah, that's like warm colors or maybe analogous colors. Here we have cool colors, some warm colors. I would say some analogous colors. We have greens and teals and blues. Here, pretty much neutral colors. There's a little bit of blue in there, but mostly grays and browns and black and white. What color scheme do we have here? Mostly cool colors, I would argue. You've got your greens, blues, purples. So I'll let you kind of guess. Here, it looks kind of like a split complement. Red and greens are opposite, but here we have kind of I don't know, some yellowish green, some kind of a really muted red, kind of a maroonish red, almost purplish red. So these artists are obviously thinking about using color schemes. It's not every color in the rainbow. They're limiting their colors. Next thing I need you to think about is the balance of your work. I want to see an intentional desire to make yours either symmetrical or asymmetrical or radial. Those three different types of balance. So when we drew out balance, we basically used a little scale or a teeter-totter. But here's some different graphics to kind of show you, another way you might organize it. So it might be symmetrical, it might be pretty much down the center, it might be asymmetrical or lopsided, or it could be kind of radial or radiating out from its central point. Lastly, different oil pastels techniques. You've learned these, or you're about to, depending on when you're seeing this presentation. Once you know really how to use oil pastels, and you understand balance, and you understand color theories and color schemes, you are ready to go. So lots of different oil pastel techniques out there. I will have already shown you how to do these. So I've really got these 5 goals for you. Number 1 is to work in the style of stained glass windows, and that's why I talk about stained glass windows for so long. So really wrap your head around what that looks like. Choose one of those different types of balance: radial, symmetrical, or asymmetrical. Choose 1 or 2, or if you have to, 3 different color schemes. Use the oil crayon pastel techniques that you've learned in here. So you've learned probably about 10 to 12 to 16 different techniques. Use at least two. Show me that you learned something there. And then lastly, I do have a minimum size. I've given you all a piece of 18 by 12 paper. I want you to use that whole piece of paper. Okay. If you want to cut it, I guess, to a square, I'll allow you to make it slightly smaller, but I don't want you to cut it in half or make the rectangle smaller. In fact, that's going to be difficult the smaller you go, due to the fact that oil pastels don't really allow for fine details. It's better that you work a bit larger. So here's one possible solution. First, you want to design this, right? On a piece of scrap paper or in your sketchbook. Just start designing, start sketching. I don't know that this is the best, idea, but it's an idea. I would start with pencil. Okay. Once you've got all the pencil done, if you have a Sharpie or a black crayon around, try to outline everything in black. It'll just make it look more stained glass like. Next, you want to add additional lines so that it's really broken up and but connected. Okay. You can't just have a floating cloud like you see over here in a real stained glass work of art. You can't actually cut that. And, you need something to hold it, something so that there's some leading there. So just take a quick look at where these lines are added. If you take a look at, say, the leaf on the left, how there's lines added. So just adding additional lines, they don't have to be straight. They could be curved, straight, whatever. That could really give it that feel. So I think when you look at this, you'll agree, yeah, it's got that stained glass feel. Then you start to label your colors. Some people color it in with crayons or markers or paint, and that's fine. But you could just as easily label it like Y for yellow, or DB for dark blue, or B for blue, or W for white. Then you've wrapped your head around what it's going to look like. Some people don't have that inner vision to see what the colors could look like. So if that's you, maybe you want to color it in. But if you're an artist and you just already know it's going to look good, then just go ahead and label those colors so you have a roadmap for how it's going to work. And then you can start to color it in. Well, of course, this is just still the sketch state. You could color it in or not. This one's being colored in with watercolor. But really, we're looking to take it, this just is just a sketch. Then you're going to redraw everything out on your good piece of paper and then use your oil pastels. Here's one more example where the artist started with a preliminary sketch, but wasn't too happy with the snow skier, so they found a photo reference, and that's something you can do. I really don't want you to copy some photo. I'd rather you make it your own, like this. Here's the new sketch, and now it looks like this. So it's been improved upon. So please, if you're not sure how to draw, I don't know, a turtle, for example, I mean, you could just try to make it out of your mind, but it might look kind of sloppy. What happens if you find a picture of a turtle and then base your drawing off of that? Not someone else's artwork, but just a stock photo of a turtle, for example. So just keep that in mind. So here are some student examples. This one's not quite done because, of course, it doesn't have the leading, the black lines around everything, but it's a strong start. And this is probably the best way to go, actually. Draw all the colors first and then do the black lines last. That could be your finishing touch. This one I find a bit simple. In fact, the examples I'm about to show you go from simple and kind of basic and cheesy to really, really good. So keep that in mind. We're going to progress to better and better ones. So this one's, good like this one, but all the colors are solid. There's no blending. There's not many different techniques going on. They're just kind of simple. Ooh, look at the symmetry of this one. Good color schemes. Yeah, this one's pretty cool. Getting better. This one's interesting. So if you've already learned your experimental oil pastel techniques, you can hopefully see some of those in here. Nice blending in this one. Again, I really like the ones that have the different pieces that go from light to dark. It just really makes it look like a stained glass window. So these were done by students that sat in my class and essentially heard the same words come out of my mouth. See, these are starting to get a bit more impressive. Ooh, look at the detail on that one. Holy moly. Obviously a radially balanced one, radial balance. And you could use, here's a good example of two different color schemes, right? Warm versus cool. And that's why it's okay to have two or even three. So what will you do? Think about you. Think about your interests, your hobbies, your life. What do you want to make? This one's a little optically hard to work with, but what we have here is death on the left side, kind of represented by that big black figure that you can kind of see its teeth here. It kind of looks like a skull, and the arm reaching out with the string dangling onto what looks like a hourglass. When is your time up? But notice the color schemes. Pretty cool. This is one of mine. Yes, I've done this too. This is me and my wife, my two daughters, and my dog. So yes, I did one for my family. So everyone has something different on their mind. For me, it's always my family. So what are you going to start sketching? Do you want to make a landscape? Something under the sea? Something about you? Something abstract? You've got to start thinking. All right. I hope you guys enjoy this project as much as I do.